Oh, oh, the recording's in progress. That's the next thing. And then finally, just to make sure that it's going through live on my Facebook page, which it is. Technology, eh, Mary? What's the world coming
Don't go there. Oh,
to?
don't go there.
Uh, okay, so that's looking good. Mary, thanks so much for agreeing to come on and having this chat. I've made some notes, but I don't normally do that. I don't prepare beforehand, generally speaking, because what I prepare generally goes out of the window when we end up talking about completely different things. But how the devil are you?
Oh, look, getting there. I don't know where there is, but that's usually what you say, isn't it? Yeah, despite my advanced years, I'm still alive and kicking at the moment.
Yeah, me too. I'm 70 years of age, going on 14 in my mind. It, it causes me all sorts of trouble in all sorts of places, but it's a bit of fun and a bit of excitement, really. But yeah, I read your bio, and all the way through, I was sort of getting sort of dings to say, yeah, 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 and from an esoteric point of view,
Mm.
I think that there's more going on than most people realize in the what I call the invisible realms, and I didn't know anything about this, but being involved with all this stuff, I can look back and look at my life and start to understand what's been going on through my life. But I noticed that you were born in the UK.
Yeah, that's
What,
right. I
what
was born
part?
in Lichfield near Birmingham.
Oh, funnily enough, I came through Lichfield yesterday. I came back. I was down in London yesterday, and I came back through Lichfield and the Trent Valley and all those sorts
Oh,
of things, Stafford and all those sorts of places. Yeah,
yeah,
and you were in the NHS like myself, um, nurse and midwife.
yeah.
Yeah. And what caused you? I'm just going to ask questions, and if you don't want to answer stuff, say I'm not telling you that. That's fine. That's fine by me. But so you were in the NHS, and what caused you to move over to Australia?
I call it my midlife crisis, really. I'd got to 40 and living in a little market town. And I remember thinking, well, is this it? Or is there anything else? Is the life still in the old girl? And I persuaded and there's a bit of a story with it, but briefly, I persuaded my husband at the time to actually go somewhere where it was warm because I got a bit fed up of hibernating all the time, you
Yeah.
know? So it was more about that and quality of life, living in a better climate rather than having to spend the usual thousands to go to the Med every year. I said, why don't we go where there is Mediterranean climate? And Perth in Western Australia sort of fit the bill. So in 1991, we migrated. So I've been here nearly 30 years or whatever it is. So it's a long
I've
time.
had a look to see what Agnes water looks like, and it looks very nice actually. I see the temperature's the same as it is here at the moment.
Well, we're subtropical and this is autumn now.
Right.
So we've actually got to put a cardigan on, which is really upsetting because most of the time we don't. But I've got used to the climate, Joe. It suits.
Yeah, yeah. I was in London, as I say, yesterday, and it was hot. It was about 26 degrees yesterday, and I had a cardigan on and an like an overcoat. When you just can't get it right at all. And I was walking for miles and miles. Did the normal tourist thing, Buckingham Palace, Downing Street, and all that. Saw the King, passing by, and the Prime Minister, all those sorts of things. And
Wow.
to me, it's just like a great big show, the greatest show on earth, you know. And most of my life, I've always felt apart from it, really, trying to fit in, and it's never quite succeeded. And I don't know whether you know my story, but my story is one of basically years and years of fear and stress and anxiety and depression and panic attacks. And then I
Wow.
found that in order to normalize my behavior and trying to fit in, a drink would do it for me. And then as the
Mm.
years went on and the stress got worse, more and more drink. And there's an expression, I took a drink and the drink took me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in the NHS, I was in charge of a hematology department. And
Wow.
over time, as the stress built, I needed more and more drink and then medication and everything. And in the end, I lost the job. I lost my wife and kids. I lost my home, and I ended up sort of sleeping rough, and stuff like that. And right at the end, I um I tried to do myself in because I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I made a couple of serious attempts to kill myself, and they didn't work either. And I see that that's purposeful now. But in the second attempt, I was going to say in the last attempt, I hope it's hope it's the last attempt. In the
Yeah.
last attempt, what happened to me was the peace that passeth all understanding descended upon me. And in that moment, see, I've got the thing going up my. This is what happens to me. I get a thing going up my spine when these things are. And oh, it's coming in nice. It's like a comforting type feeling up my spine. And
Yeah.
in that process, time stood still. You know. And
Right.
Mary, I understood everything, absolutely everything. And I was even given a sort of what the Americans would call a cipher, and it's a bit like the not the Reiki symbol, the sort of symbol for peace and almond stuff. I was given that, and I was sort of it was like a voice, but it was really like strong thought to say, son, you signed up for this. This is your purpose, right? You've had to go through all this, so that other people can bear witness to your particular journey. But what we're going to do is step by step now, day at a time and one breath at a time, we're going to guide you through the process basically of what human life is all about. And you're going to be showing other people to do it. And so that's what happened. And Mary, it's 33 years since I've had a drink or any other mind altering medication and stuff like that. And I've been sort of plodding along, trying to
Mm.
tune in what I call to me heart of hearts, call that the soul if you like. And I just basically the connection I've got with it is hello, is there anybody in there? What do you want
Yeah.
me to do today? And the way I look at it in a way is it's my employer and it gives me a job
Yeah.
sheet every day and I try to the best of my ability to follow it. And since then, Mary, I've experienced loads and loads and loads of wonderful things. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worthwhile. I've gone on then a lot about me. I tend to hijack things, but so that's where I'm coming from, really. You know,
Well, Joe, thanks for sharing that. And that's profound in so many ways. What I would have, in my sense, would have said that what was going on from how I understand it from my own sort of connection is there's a part of us, our superconscious higher self, but also, what I call there's a life guide, gatekeeper, guardian angel, whatever name you want to give it, to an intelligence, a consciousness that supports us through our lives. And so, I feel many people, particularly intuitives, that's what they're tapping into, either their higher self or to one of these support, what I call the spiritual support team, either their own personal life guide or other guides. And it can come in a knowing, a sensing, a feeling, or that buzz that you feel. But it sounds like you've had an amazing connection to all of that. And that's guiding you through your life, which is exactly what everybody I think is seeking.
yeah, I see that myself now, Mary. I see what happened to me was that because of the alcoholism, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. And a lot of people don't know, but AA's got little to do with alcohol, really. It's about reconnecting to your essential self, really, your soul, And this thing's with me now, right on my shoulder, saying, "Go on, son, you're doing a good job here." And it's about this soul self. And soul to me is the source of unconditional love. That's the way I explain that, really. And when I don't know what to do from an ego point of view, I just say, "Look, I'm a bit stuck here, give us a clue, really." And then
Yeah.
I don't expect like information to come in there and then. I just get on with my day then because the theme of AA is the joy of living. And so I try and find something joyful to do because in the way that I explain things, they call me Dr. Lightheart, Mary, even though I've got a miserable face. They call, they call me Dr. Lightheart because I honestly feel that with this reconnection to our intuitive intelligence or our innate intelligence comes an energy that almost opens our heart. And
Yeah.
it's like levity, and levity and levitation. And it almost feels sometimes that you get lifted off the ground with this sort of openness, really. And that's what I'm trying to do as I'm trying to help people to reconnect to this, their own personal source of inspiration and intuition because I won't give anybody, and people ask me what shall I do next, and I say I can't tell you that because I haven't got a clue what I need to do next because I only get fed with the information from one moment to it at a time. And if I tell you to do something and it fails, you're going to blame me. So to me, this is about personal responsibility. This is about you chose why you came here. Within you, deep down, is a blueprint exactly that matches your soul's purpose. And if you can actually tune into that and act upon the information that you receive from there, then you'll be doing what you signed up for and you'll experience the joy of living. Mary, you'll have to tell me to shut up, or give us a chance or something, because when I get going, I get going.
Oh, look, I'm love to hear, the different accounts of, this journey that we're all on. One of the things that I get a lot of is someone will come to see me and say, I don't know really why I've come to see you, but obviously I'm going to find out. But they are often saying, what's next? What am I supposed to be doing? I want to know what my purpose is and all the rest of it. And my answer to that is your soul doesn't let you miss the bus. One way or another, it's going to knock you about a bit until you get the message. So it's about trusting that because I said your soul's got it, like you're talking about. It has a mandate. It's come here with a job to do.
Yeah,
And there's a journey with that. And the more you listen to that part of you that is that aware part of you, the more you're going to get it right anyway. And if you don't, you'll soon know one way or another and it really is about that and self-responsibility you talk about exactly where I'm coming from in terms of when people come to me they want to answers. I said you have everything you need inside you.
yeah,
you know the trouble is we're programmed out of that right from the very beginning with other people's ideas of how good we are, how we should behave, what we should do. Never can we accept, in many cases due to cultural or spiritual beliefs or religious beliefs, that we should actually trust ourselves. We've always got to trust somebody else outside of ourselves who knows apparently more than we do. And I said, but you're the master of your own awareness. You're the one that knows more about you than anybody else. Why are you listening to all these other people when in fact you've got it all within you anyway? It's just how do you do that? But it's learning not to just look at your five senses, but realize you've got all these multidimensional senses that are guiding you all the time. You're knowing, you're sensing, you're feeling, and those downloads, all that, and it can come times in a kind of inner voice or a knowing, and I've experienced all of that, or even pictures, visions or whatever. All of that's multidimensional information. Do you listen to it? Well, many people are afraid to listen to it because they think maybe if they do that, that it's not accurate or they've made it up or it's in some way they're going to go crazy. And I'm saying, but actually, that's the one that's going to make you understand or help you understand what happens in your 3D world. It's actually guiding you if you listen to it, your intuition, all those senses that we have are actually guiding ourselves in our 3D world. When you listen to it, it makes more and more sense. But a lot of people, say, well, how do I know it's not my imagination? I said, well, there's a really good indicator that tells you it's not your imagination. And I explain the difference between imagination and multidimensional information so they can know the difference. And I said, and if it's coming in instantly, I said, there's no time for you to imagine anything.
yeah.
It's already there.
Brilliant. I mean, we're saying the same thing, Mary. I call this here the seat of stinking thinking, which is basically the programmed, conditioned mind, the
That's
societally engineered mind, really, that
right.
probably clobbered us even before we were born. But within the first 7 years of life, we were like a recording device, really. And so, because we listened to all the people around us at that time, we basically took on board their ideas of how we should live. And I've called this talk, "Your Children Are Not Your Children," and that's that poem by Khalil Gibran. It basically says, they come through you, not from you. And that really, really resonates with me is that what we basically got to do, I think, starting in sort of from childbirth on, is basically try and tune in to their soul's purpose and then nurture an environment really where they think they can grow themselves. I think, and I really push this a lot. So yeah, we're saying the same thing. I've looked back at my childhood, and I was a very they used to call me or call people like us, sensitives. Oh,
Yeah.
he's a sensitive, and people used to say, oh, he's been here before, all that stuff. But I remember when I was a kid, about 6 or 7 years of age, I was brought up in a very highly Roman Catholic family, which was great, and I look back now and I've got no problems with that at all. My mum and dad were really loving, they weren't abusive in any way, except I think in a subtle way. I listened to everything that my mum said, and I
Yeah.
tried to follow her instructions all the time, And I have to say that, do you say that mother knows best? I have to say that's more like the mummy's curse now, really, because I was like almost like welded to my mother's leg until I was 37 or 38 years of age, really. And it was only really then when I started to understand and start to think for myself
Yeah.
that I'd basically been living a lot of what my mother thought I was living really, and it sort of misdirected me away from my true purpose. But I see that all as part of a big plan now, really. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, I look back and weird experiences when I was a kid is I had a terrifying nightmare that would not leave me alone. That in the night I was falling down the stairs and there was like a devil type creature, because this is only at 6 or 7 years of age, with the trident, like the
Yeah.
toaster, the three-pronged toaster was waiting at the bottom of the stairs for me, and it was like a dragon, really. So that was the first thing, and my mum and dad were up with me all night long. And then I also got a vision of the most beautiful woman in the world, right? And this has never left me. And I know now, for some reason, that that was almost like an image of Mary Magdalene. And now, Mary, I didn't understand all this at the time, but it's only looking back, it might still be clouded, really. But I have a really big, strong connection with that symbology of Mary Magdalene. But also, it's taken me to Isis as well in ancient Egypt, so all those different sorts of things. But at the age of 11, being a good Catholic family, I was sent away to train to start my priest training. And
Wow.
and while I was away in Durham, in County Durham, which is 200 miles away from my mother, I was missing my mum all the time. But there was loads of weird stuff happening every night, where it almost seemed like there was things coming in. Now I can't say, Mary, that I've got any sort of feelings or visions or remembrances about being taken away and stuff like that. I don't have that, and whether that happened or not, I don't know. But there was stuff coming into me all night long that was frightening, but I see now that that might have been some sort of a contact experience, and I don't know really, to be honest with you. But after 18 months of being there, right, my mother said, "No, we'll have to get him out." To my dad, Jim, we'll have to go and get him because he's not enjoying himself there and stuff. So they brought me back home then, and I was put. It was out of the frying pan into the fire. I was put into a local Roman Catholic Christian Brothers school. And Mary, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. It was an environment where if you didn't learn what you needed to know, they used to give you punishment. They used to strap you. So I was really closed down at an
Mm.
early age. I'm sorry I'm going on here, but I was closed down at an early age, and I couldn't really think clearly, so I didn't really do very well at school. And I found then at that early age, about 14 or 15, that if I drank, it temporarily disinhibited my fear and
Yeah.
everything opened up for me.
Yeah.
So that was the drink for me. It was to change the way I felt, to change the way I thought, to basically help me to act in a way that I was less fearful. I'll just shut up there and I'll pass it back over to you.
Well, it's interesting that you're seeing it, you're seeing the big picture, Joe, which is great, I think, for all of us when we can see the reasons why we've experienced the things and where they led us to. I was brought up Catholic, traditional Catholic family, and a loving family. So, I found that even though my perspective is very different to that programming now,
Yeah, of course.
at the time it was very useful because it's helped me understand people coming to me that are coming from more traditional religious backgrounds, and the difficulties they have when they start having experiences outside of the box that are perhaps judged as not necessarily the right thing in terms of religion, for example. Things like reincarnation, which of course wasn't part of the Catholic theology, but the numbers of people experiencing that, going back into past lives and having that experience or flashbacks of a past life or whatever. So, of course, then you start questioning, don't you, when you realize that it's not fitting in with what you've been. And then I started to question lots of other things. But I was grateful for it in the sense it helped me understand where people are coming from if they're coming from that particular perspective, because I understand that they're trying to work out a bigger picture for themselves from that. And that was very useful. So for me, I can see all the positives as well as the things that, really highlighted to me the limits of religion, if you like.
Mm.
And I hope I didn't upset anyone by saying that, but for me, that's what it did.
No, no, I agree. And one of the things about AA is that they say for you go through a 12-step program really, and it's about really um, reconnecting to your essential truth vibration. I'd call it that really. And I think the more that we get our ego out of the way through various techniques, and this is basically what I try and teach people is how can you know that you're in ego consciousness? Well, basically because you feel tense. You feel nervous, irritable, discontented, or angry, all so my thing is about focusing on feelings first. I'm going to say a rude thing here, but I call it the F off approach to health and happiness. And the F off
Yeah.
stands for focus on feelings first. Right. And so if people focus on the way that they feel, because most of us, like myself for a long time, I was so disconnected from my body's consciousness that I was just on this sort of treadmill of trying to be successful. And don't get me wrong, I was really, really successful as a young man. I was going places in medicine and stuff, but deep inside me, something wasn't right, you know.
Yeah.
And I know then that I had to start expecting, which means to look outwards and to start inspecting. That's what I was taught, really, almost to take my head off, turn it the other way around and look inwards to try and find out how I operated,
Yeah.
not necessarily who I was, but what I was. And I see now clearly because I work a lot with ancient yogic stuff, really. And I can see now that the mind body of the human being is the vehicle through which the soul expresses itself. And that's what I'm trying to help people to do is to bring in this understanding in a practical way, really, Mary. And I think it's more about there's a Christian expression, and I'm not religious anymore as such, because I do believe at the heart of all religions, fundamentally, um, is unconditional love, what they call unconditional love. And I think when humans got involved, they started to say, "Oh, we won't say it that way. We'll say it this way." And ours is the best football team now, and and all that sort of business. So that's what I help people to do is reconnect with their source self or whatever you want to call that. And then all these other things started to happen. And where I'm up to now in my consciousness is I've been shown that the heart, right, basically connects to the 12 cranial nerves. And the
Mm.
12 cranial nerves each have a specific frequency, which represents a different connection to a different source of intelligence. And there's something called the theory of multiple intelligences by somebody called Howard Gardner, and he got up to eight. But I think that there's 12, Mary. And I think once you can surrender your head, what I say metaphorically, decapitate yourself, right, and
Yeah.
start being guided by your intuitive soul self, I think it will guide you one action at a time in order to sort of almost like clear the pathway to then receive in meditation this information that's trying to come in. What do you think about that then?
I think it's a wonderful way of connecting to what I call, the spirit team or your soul team. Because for me, I do it in a different kind of a way, but it's a similar kind of process, which is getting them not only to connect to their superconscious aspect, their higher self, but also to the team that supports them, the non-physical team. And by doing a kind of, I call it a spiritual defrag, really,
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
want of a better word, where I take them through a process so that they're asking that part of themselves to release anything that's getting in the way of them reaching their true self, their higher self, or whatever. I mean, there's a little bit of a process with that. And then connecting to who is it that you talk to? Who is it that guides you? Who are they? Why are they with you? What's your connection to them? In other words, their bio. You want to know who it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, of course.
Yeah. Because the more that you can make it tangible, the more you will have confidence in it. And also, who else is in the team? Who else supports you? And to allow that part of their awareness to start bringing in more of an understanding of who they're connected to, whether those intelligences are angelic, whether or not they're, interdimensionals, extra dimensionals, ascended Mars, it doesn't really matter. It's whatever they are bringing into their consciousness that supports them on that higher level so that they can have a working relationship with them, which means having a dialogue so
Yeah,
that you can actually say, well, what about this? Explain it to me, so that you're more proactive, not just waiting for the information to come, but actually being proactive. And a clairvoyant, anyone clairvoyant knows exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone has this, you know that.
mm,
Everybody has the ability to do this. It's not just special people. The only reason we call them special is because some of us have forgotten that we can do it, or we've been told we can't do
yeah,
it.
yeah. Or that we
Whenever
shouldn't, or that we shouldn't do it because it's evil.
that's the other one, of course, is you're going to invite lots of unwelcome entities and what have you. So they scare the living daylights out of you, so that you then feel completely disempowered and shut it all down anyway. But I've said to people so many times, everyone can do this, because otherwise, I said, you're going around with one eye closed. Because that other part of you that's tapped into consciousness itself and all the higher frequencies, you're shutting that down because you're told, well, you're going to go crazy, aren't you? Or you're going to invite all these awful things to happen, and they're going to con you, or all these messages, which sadly, many of them do come from religious fraternities, from
Yeah,
different religions, which is the negative side, I think, of that side of belief systems when they frighten the living daylights. I mean, as a Catholic, we were told we're born sinners, which I never thought was very fair. Why should I get blamed for because Eve ate the apple? I had nothing to do with it. As a child, you say that's not fair for a start. Why should I get blamed? But we're all sinners. What a way to start your life, being
yeah.
told you're a sinner before you've even, you know, that's the kind of thing that I struggled with. Is it some of that didn't seem, I didn't think God was very fair. Let's put it like that.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I can see now sin being from the Greek apparently means to miss the mark. So I can see fundamentally where they were coming from. And I do believe it all started good intentionally, really, to be honest with you, at the root. But once again, as humans got involved, they started to change it, and then but to me, I see this now as all about realignment to source self, which means different energy processes, really. And I was doing a workshop over the weekend, and really, I try and show people about, the Russian doll, where you've got like a big doll, and there's 12 of those really, and from source self through the cranial nerves, through source self, there's different information coming in really, and all those areas can have obstructions. So what I feel is happening now, because there seems to be a great shift in consciousness coming across the planet now, where people are almost like being forced to face themselves and to face their own fears. And because fear causes us to go into a protective mode, and we tend to bury stuff that we maybe feel guilty about, shamed about, afraid of. So there's a whole load of repressed, suppressed, or even oppressed energies within our mind which we're being forced to look at, take actions to unlock it and basically neutralize it. And all the energy that's being kept there to keep it down. There's an expression, you're only as sick as your secrets. It's a very strange expression, but I think we've tried to keep stuff down that we've been ashamed of, or whatever. We're being forced now to face it, to take an action, to neutralize it. All the information, all the energy that's kept that down then goes back into our system, re-empowers us, so we get courage then to take the next step. I know I've gone on a bit there, but I think all of us, every single person on the planet now, is in some way being forced to face their past now in order to go forward.
I think you're quite right in the sense that I think this awakening is about realizing we're more than just this vehicle that we're housing with the soul, and that we're here because of a bigger purpose rather than just living our life getting married, having kids, and basically, getting rid of the mortgage and then, passing on. I think now what's been wonderful about some of the chaos that's been going on, and it has been chaotic and it's pretty scary in many ways. It's forcing us, as you say, quite rightly, to face all our fears and to transcend them so that we can actually reach a higher part of ourselves. And generally, I think people don't do that willingly.
No,
Usually it's because
I agree.
they've actually got no other option. It's like, I really don't want to do this. I'm afraid you've got no choice.
Yeah. I I
But
think that's so important, Mary. I think everybody has to reach almost like a spiritual rock bottom where the pain is so intense. They've tried everything else, right? And what I help people with, because I say to people, I go through a dark night of the soul every morning when I wake up, for a joke, but it's almost as if a challenge is presented to you every single day. If you're given this set of spiritual tools, you can overcome them with your innate skills and abilities in your own unique way. As soon as you face the challenge and you actually go through it, then you get more re-empowered then and stuff like that. So I think that seems to be the way I explain it and help other people with. And it all comes down again to that 100% personal responsibility. My feeling is that this works exactly the opposite of the way the world works, is this works by attraction, not promotion. And I
yeah,
try and explain to people that my feeling is that the soul will attract to itself every day, right, what it needs to learn next. So it's almost like every morning when you wake up, the stage is set. And if you jump straight into the day, you're going to be in trouble. But if you can just in the morning, in an almost like objective, detached way, try and feel what you're being presented with, and then work out how you're going to go about things. Then that's how I seem to do things now. It seems to be working. And there's lots of stuff I think, do I have to? Because the little kid in me is like, oh God, do I have to do that? And I get you, you do, son. Just get on with it, really.
yeah. The way that I've looked at it, Joe, is because I do a lot of past life work as well as other hypnosis. When you've taken somebody through a particular life and they see themselves as passed on, and the first thing I will say to them, well, what did you learn in that life? And they may say limits, compassion, all these kinds of things, and talking about the next life and who they're going to have to give them the adventure, the human adventure again, and all the different challenges that they're likely to have in the next life. And I've come to the conclusion, for me, it's how I understand it now, that free will is more about facing those challenges and deciding whether or not you're going to be a victim of them, or are you going to find the golden thread that's part of that experience and the reason why you've created that in the first place for your soul.
No, I agree. I think that because before we come here, right, we
Yeah,
almost like choose a curriculum, so you get a choice. So you're in sort of with the curriculum officer or your academic tutors from the world of spirit, and they say to
yeah,
you, what do you want to do next? What adventure? It's like the holodeck on the Starship Enterprise. What
exactly.
do you? Oh, look, I get that thing again. So you can
Yeah,
choose, oh, that looks good. And I say to them, I fancy that alcoholic one. That looks like interesting. And they go, ooh, it's quite tough, that one, right? Do you really want to do that? And they say, these are some of the things, right, that are going to come up, but you'll forget all about that as soon as you press the button. And so it's almost as if the curriculum is set or free,
yeah,
so you can't change the curriculum. It's like a stream of film clips, really. But you do get certain free will choices, and it amounts to really feeling your way through, and almost like feeling into the future of the best way to go forward. That's how I seem to do it, really. But it's almost
yeah,
as if, do you want tea or do you want coffee? That's about the limit of free will choice we get, really. You've still got to do it, Joe, but you can have a drink of coffee or tea, or you can have a lime juice if you like, but carry on, carry on. So I do see that, and I see in my understandings now is that it's almost as if the soul and the ego structure form a contract with themselves as well, where both of these evolve, right, by working in harmony with one another.
yeah. And I absolutely concur with all of that. And I mean the other thing is that I remind people who are feeling pretty disempowered that we've been born with all the tools that we need to really tackle this life. It's just that we are completely disempowered by so much out there that tells us that we're not good enough. We can't do this. We always need somebody else to fix it or whatever.
Yeah.
And to get away from that kind of programming to realize that actually you're pretty strong and you've got amazing abilities and talents. So what are they? And how can you use them to get your way through? And that's what is done in all that you're also helping encourage that from the sounds of it, Joe, in the same way I as a counselor would do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I think more than anything else is I think that to me at the fundamental level, it's all about energy. So all these different frequencies are basically keys, and
Yeah.
it's trying to find the keys of these separate dimensions to open the lock to allow new information to come in, really. And one thing I'm trying to get across to people in my understanding, and Mary, I say to people all the time before I start, please don't believe a single word I say, right? Unless it sits with you and it almost like rings true and a little bell goes off for you to go and do your own research on that particular thing, because in the end, and Osho said this, I did a lot of work with Osho many, many years ago, and he basically says, if you meet Buddha on the path, kill him. Right. And I thought, that's a bit, what's all that about? And basically, it means, that the master may give you some information, but in the end, it's got to be your choice and how you take that information and how you process it. So to me, more than anything else, this is about how we process information emotionally, and emotion, energy for action. I think that to me is fundamentally what this is all about is where are you receiving the energy from? Not the energy, the information, and what action are you going to take? Well, how do you know you've taken the right action? Well, if you take the right action and it feels good and it's not harmed anybody and it's been helpful, then that's probably the right action. If you take an action and it feels terrible, right, probably the wrong choice. Go back. If you've caused anybody any discomfort, go and say sorry, right, because I'm just learning like everybody else, and then maybe use the other choice then and see how you get on with that. So it's all really about sensing. I have a thing, Mary, where my heart it like opens and it sends out like a sonar, and it goes beep, 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 beep. And if it then comes back, boop, 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 you'd almost like getting information, right, from your intuition, really. I've got no idea what I'm going on about now, but this is normally the way.
Well, I think you're very much in line with how I am with that, Joe. You're in the sense of trusting that feeling, that sensing, that knowing, or that awareness that comes to you that this, as you say, feels or seems coming from the heart. And ultimately that's what it's all about, isn't it? When we look back on all these religions, whatever perspective they have, ultimately it's all about unconditional love.
Yeah,
I don't think you need any rules if you have that,
no,
because
I
that's
agree.
the mandate. You don't need, you've got to do this because none of them will be done or acted on if you come from unconditional love. So for me, that's sort of it, really. It's the one-liner.
I agree, and I put across a thing that's is very unpopular to start with, but I say that all human love is about possession, really. It's exactly the opposite of what this is all about. It's about grabbing hold of stuff to make us feel better, because we have this need to fill the gap. But in the end, it's learning to let go of everything, right? To be restored to your primal or your primary template, right? So we don't have to get hold of anything. We have to let go of everything in order to find out what it's all about. And I think that's where I'm up to with stuff, really. Can I just, I mean, non-human intelligences, Mary, you've already sort of, mooted this, but I seem to be get communication. But over time and through my life, I've had visions of all sorts of different things, clear visions outside of myself. I've clearly heard voices outside of myself, or seemingly so, right?
Yes.
I don't get that so much now, but I have this intuitive sense of that I'm being guided, and people have said to me, I have a big connection with the stars and all sorts of different star systems. Now, before all this happened, I didn't have a clue about anything like this, but I seem to be linked into something called sidereal or Vedic astrology. And what I get told is, Joe, because this is how they speak to me, if you like, they speak to me, my team, or whatever you want to call that. They say, Joe, there are astronomical, astrological changes taking place in the universe. That's why
Yeah.
everything's changing, and that's why everything seems to be disintegrating. But it's on
Yes.
purpose, it's for a purpose. And it's almost like a big wave coming in of cleansing. It's a purge that's happening. And it's associated with something called the sacred feminine. So there's the Mary Magdalene Isis connection again. Because you men, right, have had it your own way for such a long time. And look at the state of the place. So what's happening is the wisdom of the sacred feminine or feminines is coming in now to say, look, son, this is how you do it. This is how you care for yourself. So back off a bit. We'll give you the instructions. You just take the actions that we're sending you the instructions. That's how I see it in my mind. And it's very
Yeah.
clear to me that we've lived such a long time in fight and flight, mostly fight with wars and stuff that there's almost like this cleansing energy coming in that's more nurturing, more kind, more considerate, and more compassionate. But we don't have to make up being kind because it'll flush away all the programs that have been forcing us to act in certain ways, and it will automatically bring this kindness to us. So I think what I'm trying to get to in this is it's really about surrendering to win. It's about letting our ego get out of the way and just saying, look, like, do what you've got to do. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about balance, isn't it? We're talking about
Yeah,
getting the planet into balance, and the planet itself isn't it, I believe, an intelligence.
yeah,
Like everything is an intelligence. It's all consciousness, and it's bringing into balance. And what I believe from my work is that we are getting a lot of souls coming in and have been coming in for the last 100 to 200 years, very likely, that are that little bit more activated, that little bit more aware, that little bit more of a higher frequency, that are bringing those frequencies in to help with this process of, some call it awakening or ascension or whatever name you want to give it. And to me now, it's very evident by the numbers of people that are really working on themselves,
yeah,
the fact that, I get people coming to me saying, I feel very connected with a mandate that I've got to do something to help this planet. And it could be, a child of 7 that's or 10 years old that's saying, I do healing, or I'm working with different intelligences that tell me where I'm from. And I remember one 10-year-old saying that he was a center seed, he was a being that was blue that came for the first time to this planet, and he's here to help with the pollution. These children that are coming in are fully aware of their mandate and are awake already to who they are and what they are. And that's what's happening, I think, in a slightly less speedy way with the older models,
yeah,
such as
yeah,
we just take a little bit longer to get there, but we're the bridge makers. We're the
yeah.
ones that are bringing the old to the new. And I'm sure you that resonates with you, Joe.
Oh, very much. I mean, it goes back to the prophets as well, and the poem I mentioned, your children are not your children, they come through you, not from you. And I think these kids are coming in clean, they're clean, they're unprogrammed and, almost, right, they're already unconditioned, really. And they're bringing in specific, unique frequencies and intelligence, right? And if we can just listen to what these kids are saying, from an adult, it's the opposite way around, isn't it? We need to listen to the children. We need to almost like watch them intently and be guided by what needs to be done next. So my whole thing now is about cleaning up your own act in order to be able to hear the information that's coming through and then act upon that information received. I think also, Mary, is there seems to be, I think part of the plan, part of the game, there seems to be nefarious organizations that are trying to direct us away from listening to this intelligence, by using all sorts of weird and wonderful means. And I think that's all part of it because my thing is that if we sink deep into our intuitive intelligence, it will guide us on what to eat, how to act, and so this is about initially us older ones cleaning up our own act in order that we can become better receivers for the information that's already there. But I have friends also in San Francisco and places like that, San Diego, who are working with these prodigious kids and
Yeah.
trying to take the information and transmit that globally, really. So I am in this field, and I'm encouraging parents, right, to basically take their children out of standard education, and be allowed, a bit like the Tibetan model, really, is just allow the children to grow themselves, you know. So yeah, I am in a big way associated with this, and considering I work in sort of standard university education, I'm still a lecturer in academia. Um, I'm trying to bring this understanding. I'm like Oscar Schindler, in the enemy camp, really. I'm trying to
Yeah.
very, very slowly but surely, or this is what I'm guided to do, is try and introduce the medics into understanding how to manage stress. And the stuff I teach them almost plugs them into their intuition, which starts to change the way they see things, which actually starts moving things forward in a positive way. So, I think I'm doing all right, but sometimes I make a right cock up and they think I'm a loony, but I don't care about that anymore. One of my biggest things was, Mary, is what will they think of me? And that's gone completely and has done for a long time ago. And I'm in sort of academic medicine. And on the other side, I'm doing all this stuff down in Glastonbury and things like that, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting and very exciting, actually.
Well, I think what's wonderful is that you're bridging the gap, Joe, to what is more of the bigger picture, the more multidimensional metaphysical side, and grounding it in 3D so that it can be relatable. And I've always said that for me, language is really very important. You can turn somebody off by using certain language, and yet you can get them open if it's another. For example, just saying, oh, well, that person's psychic can turn people off. But if you say, oh, well, they're an intuitive, they intuit things, that's fine.
Yeah.
You can be intuitive, but psychic, oh, it's a little bit, like this, isn't it? So for me, it's been very much picking the language that suits the occasion. You're still saying the same thing,
Yeah.
but you're using different language so that it can be relatable to more maybe mainstream thinking, which after all, we don't want to always be preaching to the converted. We want to actually bring those of mainstream into understanding a greater picture. But very much in the way we do it is either going to encourage that or not encourage that, depending on where their belief system is. So the more that you can keep it grounded, which it sounds like you're doing really well, Joe, is you're keeping the language really grounded. But I know exactly on a multi-dimensional metaphysical level, you're actually talking about something far more profound.
I love the guidance that I get, Mary, and I do trust it, like yourself. I just let go and say, go on, show me. And it moves me. This is talk about spirit moving you. It actually moves my physical body to pick up a particular book to look at and stuff like that. But this is where I find myself in the university I work at. They asked me to be the module leader in the child and adolescent mental health module, right? And I thought, wow, isn't that brilliant the way they do that? So what I'm doing is, unbeknown to them, right? I'm showing them techniques like Reiki healing and all this, right? But I'm trying to say I always talk about evidence base, but I really put forward the fact that there's a lot of qualitative evidence there, the way people feel. So I'm bringing it across in a way that doesn't cause too many antibody reactions, but it does rock the boat somewhat. But then, fortunately, I can back it up now with sort of uh, traditional sort of stuff, and it seems to go down quite well. I have a joke here, Bill. People say to me, you're a consultant in integrative medicine. What does that mean? I say, well, let me explain it simply. It's psycho, neuro, endocrino, immunohematology. Is that better for you? And then they don't ask me any questions after that. Then really, but then I try and break that down into say that psycho means that it's the psychological dimension, because I honestly believe that where we're at now is beyond psychology, but the world isn't ready just for that yet. So I try and introduce it. The way that we process things emotionally, right, impacts upon the way information is sent through our nervous system. That's in electrons. So we've
Yeah.
got here we have this invisible stuff that's going on in our consciousness that impacts upon the way energy is sent through our nervous system to the different glands. And then I talk about the seven major endocrine glands. And then I link it to the seven spinal chakras then. So you see, I'm bringing it in that way. And then I explain to them that then changes your biochemistry. And because
Yeah.
your biochemistry changes, it's like the soup through which the stem cells work. So all that information that starts off in your mind actually materializes into the way your biochemistry work, which impacts upon the way your stem cells work, which creates you. So if you can change the process up there in the psychological dimensions, you've got a better chance of being more healthy, being more happy, and so on. I don't know if I go on when I go on, Mary, but there you go.
No, it makes absolute sense. And of course, it brings in epigenetics as well. And the fact that we're not just DNA determined, which, Dr. Bruce Lipton's one of my faves for
Yeah,
that because of the way that he's explained it. Like you, if I can, I try and make it as tangible,
yeah,
my information as tangible as possible so that people can understand it from multiple levels. And that sounds like exactly what you're doing as well, Joe, is making it more tangible, bringing it into um, a more grounded vernacular so that people can actually then connect the dots and slowly allow themselves to get a bit more esoteric
yeah.
on the way.
Well, I've taken some of them down to learn Tai Chi and stuff like that, and we do Reiki healing on them now because I think, hang on a second, because it happened to me as a biomedical scientist. I used to think all this stuff was a load of old nonsense until somebody said to me, the last time you tried it, how was it for you? And I say, I've never tried it. They went, there's a Tai Chi expression and it goes like this, and they waved their hands and then they went, don't knock it till you've tried it. Anyway, so I sat in a chair. I had Reiki applied to me, and it changed my mind again. You see, so that's how it works with me. I say to them, "Hang on a second, have you experienced this?" And they say, "No." I say, "Well, sit down, and now this is what it's all about." And it changes people. And some people are so resistant because it just knocks their program into hell, really. But I think that the seed is sown in that sort of process then. You know, Mary, can I ask you a question? I get a lot of sort of information in, right? And I have this big thing with Sirius C, you know,
Yeah,
and it means a lot to me. And where that's taken me, because I go into meditation, I say, I'm not quite sure what you mean by this. So I've looked up in the sort of traditional way, and there's apparently no such thing as Sirius C, but there is to me, you know. And I think where it's led me is into ancient Egypt, and that's my connection, if you like. I met Elsa, and Elsa's my good friend now, and we're good mates, and we get on really well. But I have a
yeah,
really, really strong thing with ancient Egypt and even before ancient Egypt in Assyria and Sumerian and stuff like this. This is almost stuff that comes to my mind without me thinking about it, you know. And one of the
yeah,
big connections I got with a person called Imhotep,
yes,
Imhotep, and see, it's here now. The Imhotep has taken me to areas of energy medicine and vibrational and frequency medicine. And when I
yeah.
looked up about Imhotep, he was the architect of the first pyramid in Saqqara. And I've actually been
Oh,
to Saqqara, and I got this sense of that this is all about the use of sound and light in order to de-obstruct the pathways that need cleaning so that we can become full potential human beings.
wow.
Right. If you just bear with me 1 sec, I'm going somewhere with this. So I think that intuitively the healers of the future, or those that are already doing it, will be able to actually be given the colors and the sound and the tones in order to clean people's sort of husk up. Now, you mentioned epigenetics. I see epigenetics as almost like a husk that's containing who we really are, you know. And so the sound and light will change the epigenetic profile by basically dissolving all these obstructions. Does that make some sort of sense in your understanding of things?
I've always, I mean, Nikola Tesla talked about sound frequency and it all as part of what makes up the universe. I've absolutely concurred with that, with my own understanding that everything is frequency, everything is vibration, and that's the pathway to healing. Real, our future healing will be that's how it's going to happen. So for me, it absolutely makes sense. And when I've heard, when you get a 7-year-old bringing in a light language and talking about healing with the light language, it's exactly the same thing. They're bringing in the frequencies they intuitively know are rebalancing and reharmonizing that particular physical vehicle and maybe their energetic systems as well. Not only their energetic systems, but their energy fields, um, multi-dimensional energy fields as well. So for me, it doesn't surprise me, and I honestly believe that ancient Egyptians, which may be ancient Atlanteans, very
Yeah,
likely as
yeah,
well,
yeah,
are going to go right to the beginning of that. They knew all of this. This was all very much part of their understanding, the ancient knowledge and what have you, and that was brought through because I remember a lovely occasion anecdote of a 5-year-old that was hearing his mum talk about how the pyramids were built. And she was talking about the slaves. And he said, "No, mum," he says, "you're wrong." He said, "I was there. They changed the frequency of objects, small and large, and they levitated them into place." And this is a 5-year-old coming straight from source, from his own source that knew because he'd been there. He saw exactly how it had been. And this is what I think we're beginning to understand now. And I think we're tapping into that. And it sounds like you've got origins there from what you're saying, Joe.
yeah.
Um,
I feel that, and whether if you like, I was there or I'm just tuning into the sort of intelligence at that time, dimensionally and stuff.
I
I
think
don't.
you're, I think you're there.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah. Just got a pat on the back. Well done. So,
sorry,
no,
I'm
that's
actually, I'm getting an image of you. You weren't quite so tall as you are. I don't know how
yeah.
tall you are now, but you were, and you were bald. I'm sorry, but
No,
you.
that's all right. That's all right. No, no,
So yeah,
I agree, and I'm getting the confirmation that goes with that. But I don't sort of get too lost in that because being Joe and being like I used to be my mum used to say you've got a very, very wild imagination. So I know that when my imagination kicks in, I can get taken away. So I'm almost like keep myself centered and grounded now, really, in that stuff. But light language, that's coming through strongly now. I mean, that happened to me because I've always done it since I was a child, right? But it's coming through now in different languages and different frequencies. And I sort of have one that goes, that comes in as a sort of central guide. But there's some
right.
deep ones that come in. And that really goes through the roots. And this is Elton and I talk about this a lot. She calls it rock ET, she calls it. But when that it almost like vibrates my root chakra and then reconnects me to the earth. And so there's all these things happening to me. And I go with it now, Mary, because when it first started to happen, I thought I was going back to the psychiatric department, but I realize now that and
Yeah.
this is happening to lots of people now as they open up. And they seem to get onto me to say, "You do that stuff, don't you?" And I say, "Well, yeah." And I try and explain to them. And even in the time of Christ, this would be called speaking in tongues. And it's not necessarily that you understand the words that are coming through, but the tones will have a resonant effect on your deep intuitive understanding. And I sometimes, every week, I do light language sessions with friends across the world. And that seems to strengthen this thing as well. So I know this sounds like all about me, but I'm just trying to explain that these are the things that are happening to me and they're happening to lots of people. And there's many people in mental institutions now who are being medicated away from their gifts. And I'm not knocking that murder because medicine doesn't understand it. And I'm trying to help to bring this through in terms of depth psychology, Jungian psychology, and even humanistic psychology, Carl Rogers. So what I do
Yeah.
is I'm able then, or they give me the thing to say, talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs here, talk about Jung, talk about, you see. So they give me the info. I try and simplify it to put it across, which seems to be working really.
So you're basically channeling a number of different intelligences.
Yeah, yeah. And they've
I-
told me there's 12 coming up, right?
Are there?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
12. So it's almost like because of Joseph and his multicolored technical dream coaty thing, right? And
Yeah.
that's again associated with Joseph and Sakara and all that. So there seems to be all these links,
Yes.
which I sort of sit with. and try and work out what the hell they're asking me to do, really. And sometimes, really, to be honest, it's overpowering and I get overwhelmed by it. So I have to sort of say, you'll have to back off and give me a break now, really, so.
I suspect, Joe, as your frequency rises, you'll be able to contain more and more of that. I think, this is what's happening is we get upgraded so that we can take on more
Hmm.
and take on more information and more channels of data and whatever as well. So, but it's interesting that you say back off when you've had enough.
Yeah.
I think is really important.
Oh no, I see it as a partnership now, Mary. I say, look, and I try and say it nicely at first, right? And sometimes I'll get a push. No, Joe, you'll have to do this now because it's the time. And I'm sorry that we're pushing you, or we're sorry we're pushing you. But because I get a feeling of, oh, it's got to be done, it's important.
Yeah.
And I've just had one of those weekends where I've just been like loads and loads of stuff's coming in. But now I'm knackered, to be honest with you. So I need a bit of a physical break. Because Mary, like all of us, I only ever feel like I'm scratching the surface of what's possible here. I'm learning like everybody else, and people come to me as though I'm like a font of all knowledge, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You know, they say what's coming up, and I say I've got absolutely no idea, really. You know,
Yeah, join the club. I think
yeah,
we're all I've sort of tried to find out and they're saying nah, you've just got to go with the flow. And also because it's going to be so big that they're saying it's best you just take one day at a time.
yeah.
I don't know if you've got that sense as well, but that's what I was sort of
I have to live my life, Mary, because what I've learned is from Alcoholics Anonymous that have taught me. And as I say, it's not about the addiction itself. It's about being away from your essential self. So it's just putting you back together again. So then you can get the information that you really need to act upon. And what happens to me is intuition only works in the now moment, or so they call it. It only works vertically, basically, and that's mine. Because if I go, my thing is, if I look too far into the future, I start to get fearful again. And
yeah.
I'm tuned in now because my throat closes and I get a grip in my gut. And I know that my ego in some way is sensing some sort of a threat, and I know
Yeah.
that I'm out of alignment then. So I try and keep tuned into my feelings because as they say, yesterday is history and tomorrow is a mystery, right? You know,
Good one.
and so from a faith and trust point of view, I go back to my heart, back to my center, back to ground, and then the information starts to flow again then really. So this is literally going with the flow because it's a feeling of openness, you know.
Yeah.
Mary, we're coming up to time, and there's many more things that I would have loved to talk about, but not my plan really. But i- is there any sort of clues that you could give to people how they can almost like not materialize as such, but take the correct actions that will clear them in order to understand more of what's going on? Can I ask you what you might suggest to people in general?
Well, I think in terms of, you're talking about tuning in and getting information and help from your spiritual team, however you think about that. The most important thing is your intent. And if your intent is of the highest, away from ego, away from fear, you're only going to pull in then those high frequencies. So it is always about what is your intent, and is it coming from the heart, from love, compassion, etc. Then you really can't go wrong because that's the frequency. It's you're tuning in and you're using the highest frequency that we all want to be part of, which is where we're all connected, we're all in unconditional love. If you're doing that, then that's what you're going to get back. So it's not rocket science, really, is it?
No, no. It's as they say, it's keep it simple, or if they want to
Keep
be
it simple.
rude, KISS is keep it simple, stupid. And I'm all right with that now, you know what I mean?
Too.
Mary, Mary, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thanks very much for coming on. And hopefully we can keep in touch and maybe do another one of these sometime down the line, if that's okay.
That would be lovely, Joe, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me. It's
Thanks,
been a
Mary,
pleasure.
and have a lovely rest of the day. And thanks everybody for tuning in. And on that note, may the force remain with you forever and ever. Bye
Take
bye.
care.
Bye.